Hickok 45 here, Sheriff Hickok 45 actually, loading up my Sheriff's model, Colt single action with 4440 rounds. That's what I'm doing. It's got an itty bitty barrel, doesn't it? I bet it won't even work. See if I can hit anything. Woo! I think it went through it, didn't it? Yeah. How about that 2-liter? I wounded it. Oh, I'm sorry. I wounded him. They were out of ammo. 5 rounds. Now, look at that. Where's my ejector rod? Ah, yeah, it's lying over here on a table. That's why there are already some holes in the target. We forgot. I forgot. I need an ejector rod here to get the ammo out. Sometimes they'll fall out. You get the brass out. There you go. So you have to have a pencil with you. I'm sure that Wyatt Earp, if he carried one like this ever, he probably had a ballpoint pen or something he used, right? So, yeah, little Sheriff's model. That's what it's called. That's what it says right on the barrel. So back in the 1880s, maybe even the 1900s, every sheriff carried one of these. You think? No, but some apparently did, perhaps, you know, because there were some of these sold in each generation of Colt single actions. There were some of these made. All right, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll fire this one. And those who are around Sunday mornings know that I've had this a month or two, and the grips that were on it, I got it in Tulsa. The grips were ill-fitting, to say the least. They were horrible. They looked good from a distance. They were stag, but they were terrible, terrible fit, which didn't bother me because I got a good price on it, and I knew I could replace the grips, which I did. I got these from Altamont, and they're oversized, and I honed them down. I may not be totally finished with them, but I got them smooth, and they fit. I may take off a little more, I don't know, but they feel fine, and boy, am I glad. There's nothing worse than well, there probably is something worse, but I hate a revolver or any gun where the grips are just not right at all, you know, and sharp or edges and not fit. It's especially on a Colt single action. It's just terrible, sacrilege, isn't it? So that's what this thing's called, the Sheriff's model, and I'm gonna shoot it some. It's got the 4440 cylinder in it. Can you see that? Yeah. And I got the special 4440 barrel. So I got to change the cylinder out if I want to change to 44 special. And I've got to change the barrel out to 44 special, right? No, that's wrong. I don't have to change the barrel, just the cylinder. So we'll do that as well. And those were except for the 5 shots I fired before you got here, and I couldn't get the cases out because I didn't have a stick with me, and we just restarted. So anyway, yeah, I haven't shot. That's the first time I've used today the 4440 cylinder, and I've really not fired it that much, period. So you're kind of with me in some of the early firing. Fired it on a Sunday video, remember, though, a little bit. Okay, so I might shoot, and I'm going to shoot this thing again if that's okay. That's some old 4440. It's hard to find 4440 that is jacketed. I forget what I paid for this a long time ago, but I'm running out of it, I know. I hate that. It's one reason I shoot 44 special usually if I have something like this. So let's skip around, let's load 5. And these might be my last 4440 rounds that I shoot. Well, that one was a tight fit. And I just want to test this cylinder, make sure it works. Okay. The Sheriff's model. Just make me a sheriff? You think I can hit anything with it? How about smoke a pot with 4440? All right, another 2-liter. Wounded him again. Whoa. I know what I'm doing. Getting a little high, I think. Yeah. Okay. Pretty cool. A single action with a 4 3/4 inch barrel, I think, is more difficult to hit with than a 5.5 or 7.5. And then when you get down to a 3, for some reason, it's a little, for me, just for me, it's more problematic to hit with than, say, a double action revolver. That's that one that was tight, wasn't it? Oh, if I could get it, there we go. But yeah, I'm not sure what that's about. Like, I've got another 3-inch barrel out here. That's the one. Well, I guess I'm just not getting it the right spot there. There we go. Okay. This is a 3-inch Model 13 Smith, and I could hit. Not that I'm bad mouthing the old Colt single action. You know, I love them, but boy, if I just had to, I don't know, if I had 6 rounds and I was in a shooting match, or you were going to pay me a lot of money if I could hit certain targets out here or something, yeah, within 5 seconds, oh man, I would take this, because I don't know, just something, it's just different. So I don't know what it is about a single action in a 3-inch barrel, but it's a lot harder to hit when it's got a short barrel, for me. Although I was reading that Jesse James actually, I guess before they even offered him this length, or he didn't have one, but he actually unscrewed the barrel, took the ejector rod housing off, probably a 4-inch barrel or whatever, 4 3/4, and maybe a 7.5, I don't know. But he took the ejector rod off housing and he unscrewed the barrel, and he carried that as a belly gun, you know, with no barrel. Well, that's interesting. You know, the barrel doesn't really offer any support for the cylinder or anything, so that round's still going to come out of that chamber. You're not going to have any rifling, but if it's just up close and dirty, I guess it wouldn't matter. But yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Not recommended. Not recommended. So short barrels. Yep. So let's change out the cylinder, too, and because the main reason I got this was it was 44 special. 4440 is great. I've got a Henry rifle, the original Henry from Henry Company and everything, in 4440, but I'm not searching high and low for a 4440 anything really, because the ammo is kind of hard to come by. It just really is, and very expensive sometimes. Now if you hand load yourself, it's not that big a deal. So this is preferred, 44 special, which is still expensive ammo, but I load a lot of it and kind of thing. So all you do is switch that out. This is a pretty neat little rig, and you've got 44 special or 4440. Get that back in. Wait, let me lube it up here, make sure now I'm not wrestling unnecessarily. I generally, with a Colt, I have a low, I may have talked about this, I have low tolerance for base pins that are tough, but they do have to be aligned perfectly, and you got to have that traverse pin there, you got to have that just in the right place. There we go. Okay, so if those things are so tight that you can't get them out or in, I take a Dremel and I work on them a little bit, or some steel wool. I do it carefully, but I polish them down to where they will go in and out without falling out, of course. Okay, so now we are 4440 different chambering. I'll go ahead and let that thing soak a little bit. There we go. All right, pretty cool. Before we shoot again, I want to thank Alabama Holster. Been using them for a long time, so check them out if you have not. I know a lot of you have, and you will find something you'll like, I guarantee you. So 44 special, sheriff's model. Now I'm going to shoot some here, and I'm going to do a little bit of history that I know. I think Cimarron, some others make these. We've done one, and this is not just a Hollywood creation, the sheriff's model. Now the other thing, you all chime in, you all that know more about it and everything. Typically, if you are the sheriff of a county, for example, it depends on what period of time, but you're not out fighting bad guys every day as much. You got a lot to do. You're the administrator, you're the manager of the sheriff's department. You might have a lot of deputies, or you might have one or two or whatever, and they're doing a lot of the work. Of course, if it's arresting people, serving warrants and that kind of thing. If it's a really small county or something, maybe you're doing a lot of it too. But sheriffs are kind of known for, they're not expecting to be in a shootout today. They might carry a cooler pistol, what I'm trying to say. They may not, but you've heard the phrase barbecue gun. It's typical. See the sheriff, depending on what state you're in, he's at the some fundraiser or barbecue, and he's got a pearl-handled 1911 he's wearing or something, you know, or he's got something with a shorter barrel like this, you know. He just needs to have a firearm, but not necessarily the most tactical firearm, even back in the day. Okay, so as I read back in the 1880s, Colt started getting requests for shorter barrels because they'd already gone into like 5.5 and down to the 4 3/4 and everything, and they were getting requests for even a shorter barrel from generally outlaws or law enforcement, for sheriffs, literally from sheriffs might want just a shorter barrel, or someone just wants more of a hideout gun. Okay, and so they made some in the 80s, and then all the way up through to 1940, that whole first generation of these guns, that whole first generation, the standard lengths were the 7.5. How's that for a contrast? 7.5 barrel. That was the first ones, right? We've gone over this a lot of times in our videos. And then the 5.5 and the I guess the mid to late 1770s, and then the 4 3/4. You know, so those were all popular in the standard lengths. Okay, and then they would make one with a longer barrel. I think they took $1 an inch that you added or some kind of thing like that. But they were getting requests sometimes for shorter barrels. And I think it was 1882 along in there, they brought out some that had like 2.5-inch barrels. And then they extended that to 3s and I think even 4s and everything without the ejector rod housing. Something a little more convenient, okay, concealable. And I read that out of the 357,000+ Colt single actions that were made in the first generation, 1873 to 1940, basically, 1,400 of them were in these configurations. 1,400. So they actually existed in the first generations, you know, starting in the 1880s, I guess, you know. That's not to say somebody didn't take their 7.5 inches Colt in 1873 and hack it off, you know. But that's a kind of a real thing. And again, like I said, in law enforcement, you don't need a big long barrel necessarily if you're not the one out arresting people every day. And then again, when they started making them again in 1956, in 1960, I believe it is, they came out with, you know, second generation, that would have been, with about 500 or so of them. And they were, what were they? They were chambered in .45 Colt, I think all those were. I don't know, maybe not all of them, but .45 Colt. And about 500 of them. And they were, they had a, what was it, SM after the serial number for sheriff's model. Does that make sense? And so those are highly collectible, as I understand. Okay, second gen guns are collectible, and so there weren't that many of the sheriff's models. And then in 1980, 82, they made some 80. They started making some more, and that's where this one falls in. 1981 is the vintage on this, and they were, I think, all of them, or almost all of them, were 44, 40, 44 special. That's where this baby comes from. Okay, 1980s. And pretty nice. And these things can be pricey, especially those second generation ones. All right, so now we're changing calibers on you. Wow. Now let's just shoot some. Oh. Yeah, Prince a little high. Let's try to hit the cowboy. We got him. We got him. All right. Now you're thinking, well, that is a useless piece of junk. You got to have a stick to get the cases out. Well, you know, in most gunfights, who was it, Tom Gibbons? So I always attribute it to him. Said that you're going to run out of time before you run out of ammo, for the most part. And again, if this is just kind of the same reason a person would carry a pocket gun, strictly, well, most handguns anybody carries are for defense, but it's to save your life, get you out of there, get off me gun, and you're not going to need a lot of rounds, generally speaking, even the sheriff, right? So it's not as crazy as it seems. You're being short, not having an ejector rod to reload like lightning, right? As long as you got a stick, a pen, something in your pocket, you can get them out. Sometimes they'll just fall out. Maybe you could blow them out, whatever. So that's the thing. Not totally useless at all, and very handy, very handy. And I think it's a good looking gun. I really do. Colt's sheriff's model, and it just says .44 caliber. kind of interesting because that's what the barrel is, 44 caliber. It's the cylinders that are different chamberings. Okay, so pretty neat. What should I shoot? Oh, I was going to try. I guess this is too hot. There's nothing about being special load. It is 1,000 feet per second. I'll try a couple of these Underwood 44 specials. Those are nice. I think I'll try a couple before I get too carried away. If you want magnums, get magnums and get a Magnum revolver, you know, so I don't want to overdo it. Okay, Colts are plenty strong, but they're not magnums. Yeah, that's pretty warm. I don't know if it's I don't know. I'll shoot the other one. Yeah, that is a warm round. That really kicks. So I won't shoot any more of them. I think it's probably okay, but oh, here I go looking for that ejector rod again. But you don't want to shoot really hot stuff in a Colt. They're not designed for that, and that's probably fine. But that was really that was a bit of a handful in this little thing. Of course, with a 3-inch barrel, you don't get the recoil absorption and the weight that you might in another one. So anyway, kind of the 3 different periods, you know, I guess I just talked about that. You know, in the 1880s, they made some of these, then on up through 1940, 1400. That's the numbers I got. If you know differently, if you're a Colt researcher, let us know. And then again, around 1960, they came out with their 2nd generation ones. And not a lot of them, you know, about 500. That's roughly, what, half a thousand, something like that. And you can see why they would be so collectible. Got the special serial number. And as I pointed out before, we're definitely clear, of course, the actual frame is different. You see, on the side, you don't have this lug over here for the ejector rod housing. See how the frame juts out there because it's got to receive the ejector rod housing there. Whereas on this one, the little one, you don't have any of that. See, so it is a different model, different frame and everything. It's not like you can just you know, pop a different barrel in one of these. Okay. So there you go. So then again, and then 3rd generation in the 1980s, where this one comes from, and they're not as shootable. And I don't know if I could hit the gong if I shot it all day. Probably could. Figure out where to hold and make sure I don't flinch a bit. But they're just cool. They're just cool, and and again, just as a self-defense firearm, whatever period of history you're talking about, a little barrel doesn't matter, right? You got a big bullet and a short barrel. It's just not much of an issue because you're going to be close enough. It just doesn't matter. Like this bowling pin right here. Take him out. Okay. Or this guy right here. Or that stop sign. It couldn't resist fooling around there a little bit. You're not going to be shooting a long way off, and you got a big chunk of lead, and it gets the job done. And I'll just shoot a couple more. So it's this is a toy for me. In a lot of ways, it's not something I'm going to take to battle. It's the one Colt you might have heard me if you've seen most of the videos talk about. Recently, actually, I guess, how if there was one single action, I'm not desperate to have another Colt single action. I've got enough. Is there such a thing? Maybe a sheriff's model. They've always appealed to me in some strange way. But every time I'd look them up, I've told you all this, or see one at Gunbroker somewhere, I think, wow, $5,000-$6,000? What is the difference? Why are they so high? You know. And but then if it's a 3rd gen, it's not as bad at all. And I found this one with the horrible grips on it, and I think it caused the price to be a lot lower. And so anyway, I just, it's one I didn't have that I needed. So let's shoot some Steinel here. Yeah, Steinel 44 special. Oh man. And like I say, I fitted these grips. I might do a little more fitting, but they're pretty good. I showed you all on Sunday morning the others Here I go swinging around. Well, let me empty it. But it had a bad fit right here. You couldn't do anything about it. It's one thing to have a bad fit down here in the back. You can hone that down carefully and mess with it. You got to take them off and hone and put it back. Do all that. But the stag grips, they were flush back here, so you couldn't move them forward. Unless you know how to stretch stag. and you had a gap here. On the other side it was worse, but a huge gap between the frame and all that, and somebody just stuck them on there. I don't know, didn't care that they didn't fit or something. And I got out my rotation here, and they were horrible. So I'm glad to have grips that fit. You always want your grips to fit. All right, 44 special. It's a special round. So, I don't know, should I waste one or two on the gong? I'll throw a couple out there. Like I say, I haven't shot it much, so that's my excuse, other than having a 3-inch barrel and tough to shoot well at range. All right, I sell myself short, don't I? I'll quit while I'm ahead. How about you, cowboy? Wow, what a ring. About another 2-liter down there. I think I have one left for the propane tank. No idea. So, if you're really focused, it's not that a 3-inch barrel is less accurate, really, than a 4 or 5 or even a 7, I guess. It's that it's just harder with a shorter sight radius to get it right. And then sometimes they'll shoot even higher, print higher than a longer barrel, and you got all that going on. But let's make sure it's empty. It is. We'll make really sure. We'll get the brass out. Sometimes an empty piece of brass will actually fire. I always hate it when that happens. Yeah. And exaggerate safety. So it seems maybe like, well, why would you want a firearm? You got to have a freaking stick to get the cases out. How crazy is that? Same with the 1917 revolvers. If you're firing individual rounds, with that clips, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And then again, having 5 or 6, if you are the sheriff, it's 1885 or 1985 or 2015. Having 5 rounds is not a huge limitation. Okay, it's not a big deal. So the firearm does have a purpose. It did have a purpose, and much handier and lighter to pack around, and quicker to get into action. That was one of the reasons the shorter barrels became popular with civilians with the Colt single actions. The 4.75 becoming very popular, just quicker from the holster and all that. You might not hit anything when you fire it, but it was quicker into action, less barrel to fool around with, that sort of thing. But anyway, pretty cool. And that's kind of how it got the sheriff's model name. And by the way, Colt, as I understand, didn't come up with that, as is often the case, like with Peacemaker or anything else. The sheriff's model was just something that I think the distributors came up with, or just people got to calling it that, because they knew some sheriffs were buying these, and people in law enforcement, and they just became known that. I think in the 1900s, actually, that name started being used. Also, storekeeper's model, house gun, they call them different things, but Colt really didn't designate them that way. So, in fact, interestingly enough to me, I think a couple, when was it, in the 1880s or somewhere along the line, a distributor in Chicago, I think a couple of different times, a couple of different distributors actually bought some of these from Colt, I believe in the 1960s even, but ordered the shorter barrels, so it's kind of interesting. The shorter barrels went to the Chicago area, right? They're probably still floating around South Chicago, no doubt about it, right? So anything I forgot to tell you about it? I don't know. I guess nothing you really wanted to know. And a lot of you maybe would never carry a single action for defensive purposes. Don't know why you wouldn't, but some of you probably would not. But at any rate, they're fun, and it's a kind of an interesting Well, I guess you could say a piece of history, but I mean, after all, anything that happened before, what, today, is history, right? Yeah. So, Colt Single Action Army Sheriff's Model. And as many of you know, I had a hard time, went over, I was going to shoot it one Sunday, and I brought the wrong ammo. I keep thinking it's 45 Colt, like all my other Colt Single Actions, but it's 44 Special. I have trouble getting that into my head sometimes. But the Colt's Sheriff's Model, pretty cool little gun. No home is complete without one. Life is good.
Oh yeah, that's better. This is a great gun for defense. Oh hey, didn't see you guys there. While I've got you here, I want to remind you of our friends over at Talon Grips and Ballistol. Talon Grips makes grips, can you believe it, for all different types of firearms. You can get rough texture or more of a rubberized texture. It just sticks right on there. You know, really affordable, really cool option to improve the grip for your handguns or rifles. So please check them out at talongungrips.com. You'll be glad you did. And also Ballistol. Dad has been using Ballistol for many years. It's a cleaner and a lubricant, and it's non-toxic. It works really great, and we're happy to have them on board since it's been a part of our shooting endeavor for a very long time. So go to ballistol.com, talongungrips.com. And also, while you're out there, I'm juggling all these things here. Also, while you're on the internet, please do check out our other social media like Hickok45 on Facebook. There's also Hickok45 on Twitter, The Real Hickok45 on Instagram. There's a John_Hickok45 on Instagram where I do some things. There's Hickok45.com. You can find us also on Gunstreamer. So check out all that stuff and then watch more videos.